picture's worth 1,000 words, right? If your tower is laying on the ground, people understand that.
We had a customer who had their entire network wiped out in a wildfire in California. Gone. Every tower, every piece of equipment they own, gone. In a matter of less than 10 hours.
These people have just lost their house, their photos, their belongings, and you're asking for a serial number on a router?
It just reminds you, why am I in this industry? Why do I do this? Why do I spend so much time pouring it into this business? This is why we do it, because we are genuinely making a difference. Well, I think we'd all agree that running an ISP, even in the boring times, isn't boring. Nor do you always know what's around every corner. But today we're going to talk about running an ISP during a natural disaster and what comes along with that, planning for the unplannable and whatnot. So I think whatever that disaster might be, let's talk about what happens after it hits. What's your immediate plan of action? What do the communications look like? How do you get the word out? And who are you communicating to?
Well, I'm going to make you back up a little bit because I think communication starts when possible before disaster strikes. A natural disaster could be a massive ice storm. You probably know it's coming. There may be some anticipation there. A forest fire, not so much. Hurricane, yeah, there's some lead time. Tornado, not so much.
Yep.
But if your customers are aware that you've got a disaster policy in place and they know where to start looking for things and your people know where to start posting things, that's going to be very, very helpful. So I think the communication post-event actually starts pre-event by having a plan.
Yeah, that's a good point. But I mean, once it does hit,
yeah,
you have to be calm. Yeah, the chaos is going to be all around you. These disasters, some of the ones that we're going to talk about, and some of the ones we've seen and witnessed. We were fortunate, really, not to have a lot of disasters. Like we had the ice storms, and we can certainly talk about those.
Yep.
But we, beyond that, didn't have the hurricanes. Wisconsin doesn't get hit by hurricanes real often. If it does, we probably had a really bad hurricane, and we really have to. But being calm, you use your software, use your BSS system to identify the right group of customers, because not every customer probably got affected by this natural disaster, and you want to communicate with the right group, because you're going to just add angst and confusion to the rest of them. So, if you can narrow it down, and you certainly should be able to do that with your software, communicate to that right group. That's an important starting communication step.
I think if it's a broad outage or a broad impact, something that you're not going to get swept up with a broom by the end of the business day, being proactive about stating that wherever you have this messaging, whether you're sending an email, text message, or it's a message on your website or on your IVR, your phone system, whatever the case may be, if you know it's going to take time and you do have something of a kind of an order of operations plan together, there's a logical place to start. You're going to get this up and running first, and then you're going to do that. I think being as transparent as possible in that helps, because otherwise it's just they're just waiting for it to come back up at their place. And to be fair, they may not understand the gravity of the situation. Most people are very empathetic during these events, and in a lot of cases, depending on the gravity of the event, internet may not be the first thing on people's minds. They might be saving themselves. But on the other hand, and I think about the ice storms are probably the biggest practical example. Again, running an ISP in rural Ontario, we weren't getting tornadoes and stuff all the time. It was very rare for that kind of thing. Certainly no hurricanes. But ice storms were a common occurrence, and it would boggle the mind how many customers would just be completely, just naive to the fact that there was that there could be any correlation between what was happening outside and the fact they didn't have any internet. So I think as kind of prescriptive as you can be about here's what's going on. We got this tower, it's like physically down. Social media is really great for that as well. I think if you have something that you can snap a picture or take a quick video.
Picture's worth 1,000 words, right? If your tower is laying on the ground, people understand that.
And I do think being specific to the impacted areas is very, very important. But I have absolutely seen some of our customers We had a customer who had their entire network wiped out in a wildfire in California. Gone. Every tower, every piece of equipment they own, gone in a matter less than 10 hours. It was amazing. Texas just finished a huge flood event over the 4th of July holiday. And it was a lengthy event, very targeted around the river, but yes, there were impacts to service delivery in the area. And then you've got the search and recovery crews that have to have some sort of connectivity. If you wiped out a fiber line, you're not going to reconnect that immediately. You're probably going to stand up a fixed wireless. I know in North Carolina, after the Hurricane Helene just kind of sat there for a while. Fixed wireless, you connect first. And getting some load out was really, really important.
Yeah, I think Rick made a super important point. Use as many communication venues as you have available. Your IVR, email, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, if you're having to do stuff like that, communicate it and get it out. The SMS, right? Yeah, as many ways as you can communicate to the customer, because they might not have one of the communication methods that you used available to them. And if it's going to take a long time, the fact that customers were unaware, it was, amazing. Go outside, look at your antenna. Can you even see your antenna? Does it look like an ice block that you have on your roof?
It's not going to work until you can see it again.
Right.
And stating those things can help. But to be fair, if you can state that in a message that they're getting played passively to them when they call in, then that totally circumvents the need to have that discussion in support. It can keep the support channels more open for actual diagnostic purposes.
And then, as much detail, like you said, as possible. So what is your plan moving forward? Let customers know that, because then they do buy in, and most of them are, like you said.
Demonstrate the progress. Okay, there is something you need to fix. Snap a picture of your truck at the site.
Right. Yeah. Show the tower being rebuilt.
Well, and I also think there's a scale of the disaster. And I'm in Texas. An F1 tornado is going to cause some damage, but you're probably going to be able to get that cleaned up 5 to 7 days. An F5 tornado? No, you're in it for the long haul. You're rebuilding infrastructure for an F4 and F5. And it can take a lot longer to get your systems back in place for those households. And sometimes the households are gone. Your communities are literally gone. And an entire HOA, that's an entire community, could be no longer serviceable, washed away, not going to be able to be connected. What then? How do you good neighbor with them at that point?
Yeah. Or do you pivot your efforts to not restoring your traditional connections, but just trying to get, maybe throw up a tower, get some Wi-Fi over to the disaster recovery sites, the FEMA sites, whatever the case may be. If that's where your community is, that's where they need you. You may not be immediately putting all of your energy into trying to fix your traditional network, depending on the gravitas of the situation.
Look, I'm going to tell you, over and over and over again, and I've got goosebumps thinking about it. I have watched operators reach their hand out across state lines, across countries, to help operators who were impacted. I know that y'all sent down equipment to Puerto Rico during one of the most recent hurricanes. People send bodies to go help with the towers. They'll send equipment to go get people redeployed. It really is heartwarming to see how, and it's not just the local operators, the incumbents show up too. I know that in Texas, the incumbents really showed up and got things going immediately so that there was some level of connectivity.
Yeah, it's great how people band together during those times.
It really is a brotherhood, a sisterhood
It really
in the
is.
community.
Yeah.
Because we definitely understand the pain points that people are feeling with all of that.
So how do you balance all of this short-term chaos with still trying to maintain customer loyalty in the long term while you're navigating these emergency responses?
So obviously the balance began before the disaster, because you had to have built that loyalty to be able to maintain that loyalty.
Is it possible to erode it by just absolutely fumbling the ball on how you handle these things?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. You'll definitely, if you're not communicating and communicating, that is like, you got to be doing the work. And don't get me wrong. If you're just talking about getting this back online and it's never coming online, they're not going to buy that either. But they want to hear from you, and they want to hear from you honestly.
Most of the time, your staff and yourself included may have been impacted by the situation, right? So we had a customer that was sending out mass communications about gathering information for the inventory that had been damaged, because all of the routers that were in their particular customer locations, they owned. And as a company, they needed to be able to report it back. I will say, I think they were asking for that information a little too soon in the process, and it didn't feel warm and fuzzy to their end users. And I think you have to be very cognizant of the tone of your messaging.
I don't like that at all. I mean, that was a horrible way to lead there. I mean, these people have just lost their house, their photos, their belongings, and you're asking for a serial number on a router.
And
you need
I'm
to
like,
flip that.
wait, I'm pretty sure we've got that information already. Why are you asking them for that? There's other ways to pull that together.
In your BSS OSS system, you shouldn't have to ask a customer for.
I feel like that is an artifact of not having a proper disaster plan, right? Because then you're just in reaction mode. And they probably were asked for that information from somewhere else, and they just pivoted and they're like, okay, we got to get this information. Okay, get the information. And it wasn't even considered how that's going to land. What circumstances are these people in when they receive this message from you?
And I'm going to tell you, if operators don't have a disaster plan in place, the first place I would go to right now is ChatGPT. And I would be giving it all the prompts to help me find my outline, and I'd be filling in the blanks, and I would make it be a priority, because you don't know when disaster is going to strike your community.
And then be very specific in those prompts, because, me living in Wisconsin, I have a different disaster recovery plan than Puerto Rico or Texas.
Absolutely.
So we've all found the AI is great when you give it the right input.
Context.
Well, and we haven't even talked about earthquakes. I mean, because we have small earthquakes in Texas. There's smaller earthquakes in Oklahoma, but when an earthquake strikes California, it could be, catastrophic, right? It's something we definitely have to be thinking about.
Larry, did you guys run these sort of events when you had significant replacements to be made, big outlay for infrastructure? Did you run it through insurance?
We did. So, I mean, but you have to do the math. I mean, it's a math equation, whether you run this through insurance or not. For us, we had a set point, where it was a certain dollar value piece of equipment that was worth it. And you got to take into account, I think, all of the costs. So it's not just that piece of equipment. When you're calculating whether you're going to file through insurance, how long is it going to take you to get the paperwork that they're going to want, pull your invoices, match up the serial numbers, get photographs. Sometimes they want photographs.
It becomes a part of your process.
Right. So take all of that into account when you're deciding. But for us, we found it was definitely worthwhile in some of our bigger outages. And like insurance would also cover, in our case, like the credits that we were giving back to customers, and that became a significant dollar amount that was covered in our insurance policy. And that was critical, because you have to proactively give these customers credits. Don't wait till they ask for it. In events like this was something completely out of their control, took out their service. Just give them the credits and be as generous as you can at that point.
And if you are forcing them to ask, all of that interaction costs money too. You look at the big picture, just making one blanket, sweep across your billing is going to be probably cheaper in the end. Just to the point on insurance, we were really late to the game. We just figured it didn't make sense, and to think of all the money that we could have recovered over the years. But you're right, you have to have the right policies. The devil is in the details there. But if you're properly insured, the policies are speaking to the needs of the business, you can, right down to the credits that you need to give, that can be recovered.
That was, yeah. I mean, for us, that was recoverable. So if you had big outages, it doesn't take long to hit that deductible, because you're crediting
Oh yeah,
thousands of customers, a few dollars. That adds up really quickly.
Absolutely. It's a very interesting concept, though, between a short-term recovery and a long-term recovery. You may be issuing credits because you had a 3-day outage or a 5-day outage. What about when your systems are literally going to be down 6, 8, 12 weeks before you can get true service back to a community? Because not all the houses were damaged, and there's still people in the area that need internet. If it's all in one service plan, one service delivery method, what was your redundancy plan?
You still need to be crediting those customers, even in the long. I think even more so in the long-term case. In the short term case, they'll appreciate it, but in the long term, I've been out, and it's not only that I've been out. You need to help do that to help retain them, because if somebody else gets up faster than you in that area after that, that's the other potential risk, is somebody else recovers more quickly. My family, internet goes down, it's a tragedy. Our house goes into like chaos mode. I mean, I'm like, reprieve. I don't have to do anything for a while. The internet's out. I post that in the Slack, and I'm like offline until it comes back. They're all like, life or death situations. So
that's a really good point, though.
Well, Rick, I know you were an operator. So what was one of the hardest calls you ever had to make during a disaster scenario?
I think a lot of the calls come down to safety, and we had different chapters of conduct throughout the business. In the early days, you're just doing right by yourself and doing right by your customers. It's really easy to be tunnel visioned into maybe putting yourself in harm's way, unnecessarily.
Just because I can doesn't mean I should.
Very much so. So I think those are the things that we're navigating. If you have something happen at nighttime, like would you guys climb at night ever? Would you make exceptions? Because you're never going to schedule a tower build
right
at nighttime, no matter how busy you are. But if it is a recovery situation, would you do it, or would you wait till morning?
We would probably have waited till morning. I mean, we didn't have a lot of tower climbers on staff, so we did outsource most of our tower climbing.
Oh, okay. So that decision was kind of made for you.
But in the end, we did have some tower climbers, but I always left it up to them, and it always had to be, safety was so. People are way more valuable. I don't care what piece of equipment is down. That person to me, it means more than getting that access point back online, or getting that backhaul link back up and running. So
I found an easy way to kind of, get my head straight is I shouldn't be doing things I wouldn't ask an employee to do, right? Because you would just, I just need to do it. Like I would climb often where there was nobody on the ground, right? It was just me. I just roll out there in a truck and just take care of it, go up, go down.
Do you have OSHA in Canada? Because OSHA does.
There are jaguars and snakes and quicksand.
I think there's a statute of limitations.
Okay,
good.
Yeah,
otherwise,
right, hopefully.
This is all just hypothetical.
Yeah, right.
Listening.
I've heard of people who did this.
But you know what I mean, right?
Yeah, no, I know.
If I would never. Not only would I not ask an employee to do that, but I'd be pissed off if they did. And I would just go through that thought exercise, and that would keep me in check. It's like, nope. It just, to your point, it isn't worth the risk.
Right. Well, that's a great way of looking at it, too.
How do you really rally your staff when a natural disaster happens, knowing that they could be impacted as well?
I find this is a humanity thing. It's when the spirit comes out. I don't think there was ever a need to artificially, people, how can I help? And the internet is, as time goes on, but now more than ever is basically next to power, right? It's
power, water, internet,
an essential utility in many regards. So the impact is well understood. And I think that most people are ready and willing and able. And like you said, you sent gear down to Puerto Rico during the hurricanes. We sent a couple of our tower crews up for I think 2 days, 3 days, and just got things back up and running. Like you were saying, they started with wireless just to kind of get a pulse back on their network. And, we didn't think twice about that. And it's because if it was me, if the shoe was on the other foot, because you can't rebuild a network that took you 10 years in a week. Certainly not with your own two hands.
But one of the things Rick said, he said, we're like a utility, but do not make internet service a utility. Let's make that clear. I had to just throw that out there for the audience, because that's a big discussion, is does internet become a utility, and the implications behind that. But that's not related to this topic at all. But
I didn't say the word like, I meant to.
All right, yes. Like a utility.
Yeah.
I love it. Is there a non-negotiable for what you're doing during a disaster? as an operator?
If you have a disaster plan, I would say that's the first non-negotiable, is following it to a T, which can be hard because, you try to plan for everything. But I think sticking to a plan is helpful, especially when you're trying to coordinate multiple crews and multiple people. And I also think that we keep landing on the word communication. Communication is a non-negotiable. Being as proactive and effective as you absolutely can be, it will pay off tenfold any effort that you put into that, for sure.
Yeah, that's always a non-negotiable, I think, the communication. And like you said, people might have a plan. Have they tested it? Have they really audited it to make sure that it's a reasonable plan? Or did it seem great when I'm writing it, but when I...
It has to be dusted off.
Right. Yeah, right. Did I copy and paste it?
In a file and
No.
In a pretty binder on the shelf.
Yeah, right.
All right, we are compliant.
I will say that I worked for the American Red Cross volunteered for a number of years doing disaster recovery. And one of the things that we always did was we had a postmortem after the event. What would you do again? What would you do differently? And what would you stop doing? Every single time. Because your plans may be the best intended plans, but the execution just was not viable, not something. You've got to learn from every incident and fine tune. Will you be prepared for every nuance? Absolutely not. But if you are making sure that you're staying within the values and principles of your organization, you'll be okay.
And did you see that helping in the next?
Absolutely. It's things like, how do you pack out vehicles? Technology changes. And did you have a phone tree? And now you've got an SMS tree. Now you've got, there's different ways to, you've got to keep up with the technologies. And how do you get those documents out now? We literally had binders that we would put in our cars and take to locations. That would never happen now. There's no way. But I have to have a phone that I can keep charged, so I have to keep a solar-powered, a way to charge using alternate resources, right?
Right, because you might not be able to plug in where you're headed.
Exactly. And generators are used for other things, not my iPad, my iPhone, my Apple Watch, right?
When disaster strikes, your tools shouldn't slow you down. Sonar keeps your network, billing, and communication connected, so your team can focus on what matters, the community. Learn more at sonar.software.
So we're going to roll into a different segment for this topic, something where we can just learn a little bit more what this looks like in specific terms.
Because you didn't want me to love or hate hurricanes and forest fires?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So we're going to do something called Tell Me About a Time. So tell me about a time that you had to make a tough call on whether to send someone out in unsafe conditions.
Well, I have stories, but they're not my stories. I want to make that clear. I hear stories from our operators and put them in the Rolodex of my mind. And once where I can really pull out here.
Rolodex, for those of you who don't know, was
That's
things where we kept addresses in the old times.
I think that's the second Rolodex mention.
Okay. But it is a Rolodex in my mind. There were straight line winds along a highway, and fiber can be deployed aerially, and they're on telephone poles. And they were literally driving down the road. The telephone poles are down, they're checking on their fiber. But what else is attached to those telephone poles? Electricity. And you've got live wires. You've got staff that are driving around in an area that is not necessarily safe, and they are in there with the first responders. That's difficult. It's difficult to make the decisions on what's too dangerous, what's not, what's just assessing, and what's being out there and putting your staff in danger.
Yeah, that's some real risk.
It's not a tough call. There isn't. You shouldn't be making the tough call, because if you're making the tough call, you're probably not taking the people into account appropriately. And we talked about this earlier, but the people have to be your primary concern. Yes, you're going to have angry customers, but if you communicate again, I think we go back to how important that is. You can mitigate a lot of those angry customers. I don't, the tough call. We had winter in Wisconsin, and we had those needs to climb towers. You can't climb the towers when there's 3 inches of ice on the tower. I don't care how you're tying off and stuff like that. It just still is not safe.
Yeah, you need the heat of the sun.
You need the heat of the sun.
You just have to wait.
Right.
Yeah.
So you have to wait it out. So the tough call is you shouldn't be making that. Consider the people.
That's fair. I think what comes to mind for me is kind of what we were talking about earlier, where it's, you're doing stuff that you wouldn't ask your staff to do. And speaking of like OSHA or, the equivalent, depending where you operate, there are different rules that, a business owner, are, so we sometimes would lean into that, and the owner of the company would go out and, do the climb because he was allowed to. Now, was that a smart call? I mean, sometimes it probably wasn't, but you know what it's like in the heat of the moment. You really are doing whatever you can do. Like, we had mission critical connections, like to hospitals, for example. When you have that weighing on you, it's like, well, if I can do it, I should do it. And sometimes we would make that call. But I do think that it's very rare that you would have a customer saying, no, you should be putting a person in harm's way. And that's why, again, I think humanizing it, making it real, taking the pictures, taking the video, explaining what's going on. We're making progress. We did this, but we have to wait. And here's the ice on the tower. I think that's how you are able to navigate that successfully.
I don't think the customer sees, though, the fact that you're putting somebody in harm's way. They just want it up. So you're right. You have to take the time to communicate that stuff now. I'm not sure what the OSHA rules said about owners versus not, but in that case, I'm just selling part of my business to my tower climber for a few days because I'm not going up on that tower. So if that's my way around the rule, he can have 10% of the business until he's done climbing.
Oh, wow. So what about, this is a little bit of a lighter question, but in these times where, you're under the gun in terms of turning things over quickly, or maybe, we all keep spares on hand, but you don't think you're going to need 20 of something until something like that rolls through. You got to get creative. Tell me about a time that you improvised a solution, a creative solution to get things back up and running.
Yeah. All right. So we were a small ISP. So creative was, second nature to us. We were always making up solutions, that maybe didn't exist. But like you said, right. Okay. So I know this is going to cause issues for both of us, but lightning. Yeah, right. Lightning. Horrible. I knew the shoulders were coming up.
I packed the Xanax this time. It's fine.
Oh, good. Extra?
Yes.
Yeah, all right, good. Thanks.
Even more than usual, we need.
So lightning would take out, parts of towers, backhauls, things like that. And if you had a really bad lightning storm come through, like you said, we kept 2-3 sets of radios, the expensive licensed backhauls on the shelf because we
those
knew
are not cheap.
Those are not cheap.
Spares
That's
up.
an expensive.
Yes.
But when you need 4 of them, now you're in sad shape. So, I mean, what I remember, and maybe this isn't so creative, is, we turn access points into clients, and then we'd we'd feed off of another tower. That was our solution when we ran out of backhauls to get the tower up. Was it running at 100% capacity? Not even close. But was it running? And were customers able to get back on the internet? Yes.
Yep.
So, I mean, that was probably one of the common creative solutions, I guess, that we ended up using.
That's a good one for sure. I think about, just kind of ordinary, boring things, but like, you wouldn't have enough mounts and you would MacGyver something with a mount. Like, that's that second nature thing where it's just like, I'm going to make that happen. All right, it's solid. We're good, right? I also think about other things. And I think the statute of limitations, allows me to share this kind of thing. But, if you had to put up an unlicensed backhaul where there was a licensed backhaul and there's no spectrum, maybe just temporarily, but something that we would affectionately call Brazil mode. I won't go into more detail than that, but there's settings that you can make. We're back up and running, and it wouldn't be for long. There's these things that you wouldn't do ordinarily, but when the pressure's on and you can get a pulse back on the network, it'll push you to get quite creative.
Yeah. I don't know what the statute of limitations are, so I won't comment on that. We'll just move on to the next question.
In terms of creativity, I have heard our customers do some really unique things. Things like post-hurricane in Texas, getting spouses to drive and be in the line to fill gas cans for the generators. And they'd have somebody sitting in another corner, get the gas cans, go deploy them while the spouse got back in line to get another round of gas. And they were just literally changing off empty gas cans so that they would have the ability to get some sort of electricity to their command centers. And then setting up unique command centers. If your offices have now been flooded or your inventory location has been flooded and you can't operate from where you're used to operating from, where are you doing your business from? Do you have an RV that you can go to higher ground or that is accessible, and how do you get electricity to it, and how do you let your staff know this is where you're working from for the next 7 to 10 days?
Right.
I think necessity is the mother of invention here, and I have seen people do some very unique things in very short order to get their operations up and going again.
Yeah. I've seen some pretty creative mounts on the towers as well. When you mentioned that, I completely forgot about some of those that we crafted because we didn't have what we needed.
Yep. And unlike Brazil mode, that's the kind of thing that if it's solid, it could stay there for
Oh,
years.
yeah. We may never have taken it.
Exactly. Yeah. One thing that came to mind as we were chatting.
Brazil mode.
Hypothetically speaking, of course. When you have these reduced capacity moments, like you said, where you were creatively, using APs or as CPs and vice versa, and just making things work, you're not going to have the same capacity. And this is where I think we talked about this before, where a lot of people hear the words traffic shaping, and it's like this dirty concept. And when you have traffic shaping put in place during a disaster, what you're doing is you're proactively carving out different kind of lanes and caps, and you can prioritize the high delivery traffic and make sure that the essential stuff goes through, bring things down. The overall experience is going to be much more usable when you're in that disaster mode. And I think that that's another thing that you can do proactively as part of your disaster planning, right? Is have those traffic shaping kind of plan Bs ready to be applied.
Traffic shaping gets such bad connotations, but there are a lot of very good use cases. This being one of them, right? Do I need you to be downloading your third Linux distro when I have limited capacity?
Windows updates.
Right? Do I need Windows
updates?
Those
until we got our stuff back together. Yeah,
exactly. So I mean, there are good uses of traffic shaping. There are of course some bad uses of traffic shaping too, but we won't talk about those. But in this case, that is valid, and we did do some of that. I mean, we definitely had that capability and used it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we got one more. Tell me about a time, and I think this really kind of speaks to the impact. Tell me about a time that you got emotional or emotions ran high during the response to a disaster.
I've shared with you, I don't cry because I'm sad. I don't cry because I'm angry. I cry when I'm frustrated. I cry when things are not going the way that I know that they could be going. And I think you have to keep your thumb on the pulse of your team members that are being deployed, because again, and many times, it's not just them working for you in these disaster zones. They are also experiencing the disaster. And you have to also think about, is this a disaster for equipment, or is there a loss of life environment in here? Or are there flooding where lots of people were swept away? It's not just property. And when people are involved, this is a long haul recovery. And mental health, which is actually what I did for the Red Cross, was mental health disaster recovery services. You have to pay attention to the mental health aspect of all of it. And it's not just 24 hours. It can be 2 weeks. It can be 2 months. It can be 6 months post-event, depending on the event.
That's a good point.
So for us, like I said, we're in a spot where we had very few what I considered natural disasters. I hadn't really considered the ice storm. That almost became more of a recurring natural disaster for us.
Recurring nightmare.
It was going to happen. I mean, we knew that, and it was bad, and we had to plan for it and stuff like that. But we did have a tornado come through in one of the communities that we serviced. Wiped out a lot of houses. I looked for a picture because I have a 60-foot pine tree that got pulled out, roots and all, moved about 40 feet, and was sitting right alongside the tower that we had at a customer's house. It was a 160-foot tower. It was a nice tower. The sad part was there was that second pine tree that got lifted up and put right through his house. So, you go out there because you're going to look at the equipment, and you get there and you don't care about the equipment anymore. You just want to talk to that tower owner who, you've built that relationship with, and his house now, he is a partner, right? So that was painful. The flip side of that is once you start recovering, and you get that tower back online, the emotional part is, even if these people who've lost their houses, they have an RV sitting there, and you come out and put an antenna on their RV for them and restore their internet to their house, and they are so thankful because this is now their house, for the next many months. So the installers, would communicate that back, just how thankful people were for what, you'd see as.
Well, and I know we talked about disaster recovery plans. I would advocate that you have to have a mental health aspect in your disaster recovery plan. What are your resources in the community? Is it the Red Cross? Is it that there are therapists that are willing to talk to your staff, depending on what the incident was? But I think at least denoting that people need to debrief from the situations is important.
Acknowledge that aspect of it.
Absolutely.
For sure. Yeah, I'm with you, Larry. I think this question made me remember the gratitude, that people had. We were kind of talking about people not understanding or being impatient or whatever. That does happen, but I think that is overshadowed by when, like you said, you're able to restore things, and I think that's one of the great things, and it's probably one of these yin yang situations that makes what is otherwise a very challenging job bearable. The field technicians really do get to experience the highs, I think, more than people in the office ever do, because you get to connect with the people. You get to see the looks on their faces.
The humanity of it.
It's different being on the phone and being right in front of the person.
And it's also being different. You're connecting with these people in their domain, right? So you really get to see how they live and how it impacts them, and all of that aspect to it. So that, to me, is probably the most emotional part, is just realizing it just reminds you, why am I in this industry? Why do I do this? Why do I spend so much time pouring it into this business? This is why we do it, because we are genuinely making a difference. If this episode sparked some ideas or gave you a new perspective, consider subscribing to Bandwidth on YouTube. We drop new episodes regularly, and the best way to stay connected is to hit that subscribe button. We've got more behind-the-scenes insights coming your way. So we're going to wrap it up with a what if, another totally hypothetical scenario that's never happened to anybody ever. What if your power infrastructure fails? What is your backup plan? Power, it's a backup. What's your backup to the backup?
Right. So, it's obviously, like you hinted at, this is no what if scenario. This happens, and and it happens in tiers. So you have to have a multi-layered approach to this. We've got UPSs on site, and in honesty, we started because a lot of our sites were AC based with AC UPSs. AC UPSs are horrible.
Yep.
I think I had more UPS failures cause tower outages than I actually had.
Do we all live the same life? It's just unbelievable.
Yeah, right. So we switched to DC-based UPS systems, which were incredibly reliable.
Yep.
But now you've got the additional, battery capacity and battery maintenance, and you need to schedule all that. So you need to plan for that. Bigger sites, we had on-site generators, and a lot of times you'd have automatic transfer switches so that they could pop in.
But how long do your generators run? What's their capacity? How do you fuel them? Are they solar or are they gas-based? Or, there's...
Right. Do you do your maintenance on your generators while your power is up? Do you make sure that, those are the things. I think everyone goes through these growing pains of I spent the money, I put a generator, and then the power goes out and it doesn't fire because you don't stand up the maintenance. Absolutely.
No, you fire that off every month and make sure it kicks over, and then you kick it back off. So, when a site was big enough to have an on-site generator, we were pretty good about, it was typically a big tower that was shared, so it was a shared capacity. We get, everybody to basically fund that. So, that's one thing you can look at. You don't have to just put in for yourself if you're sharing a tower space. everybody else wants power too when the power's out. So I don't think we ever had anybody balk when it's like, hey, do you want to kick in, $10,000 for this because we really need it? Yeah, absolutely. If I get to use it, right, and it's scaled to our capacity, we're in good shape. And then remote control stuff. So, eventually when you're on battery, you need to be able to shed your power sources. So
Yep.
not almost every device we had could be remotely powered off and powered back on again. And that was like critical for us because
But that technology had to evolve. That was not a reality 15 years ago. It has become a reality that has been such a relief for the industry to be able to have that
It's
capacity.
a lot more accessible now.
Yeah,
for
absolutely.
Sure.
It existed 15 years ago. We had it.
Did you? Okay.
I mean, it was weird. I mean, it wasn't as easy.
I talk about Rolodexes. Apparently my time warp is a little off, okay?
Yeah, it was right after Rolodex technology came pouring
Tin
things off
can,
remotely.
Rolodex.
Right. We see the evolution.
I remember having to go in, and the one that we used, it did have a very, very rudimentary GUI, but it was all like binary. Like you would put in a 0 instead of a 1 and save it, and that would turn off the one circuit. And it was just like you were so happy to have it, but it was very archaic. What exists today is lovely.
Leaps and bounds.
Yes.
Oh yeah, right. It'll shed the power supply for you because it's monitoring your UPS and it knows what your loads are. Right. It wasn't I have to go in there and force it with a 1 or a 0. And hopefully I specified the port right because it was also had some weird naming convention. P1:0. Oh yes, good. Oh no, I just turned off the main router.
Oops. Get in the truck. And I think the ultimate backup to the backup to the backup. I think everyone had, portable generators sitting around. And with that, just like you were saying, you would have to deploy people on a regular basis to keep refilling the gas. You don't know how long it's going to last. You got people, that's their job throughout the night.
But even that technology is changing. I'm seeing our customers starting to deploy generators that have solar power wings that they're not having to go and gas them back up. They can get those wings set up and they can kind of set it and forget it for a while and still control it remotely.
Or drive your EV there and plug it in.
And daisy chain them. Yeah, exactly.
It's bring your Ford Lightning and
it's
not sponsored.
They do
that.
It's a little wild that technology continues to evolve for something as basic as how do you power up these locations?
But it's essential. Without power, you got nothing.
What's it going to be 20 years from now? Ooh, I can't even imagine.
Yeah.
Way past Rolodex.
Way past Rolodex. 100%.
Next time on Bandwidth, we're exploring how ISPs can make smarter, faster decisions using the data they already have. From fine-tuning network builds to adapting support based on Wi-Fi realities inside the home. This one's about turning insight into action. Don't miss it.
Remember, when you connect communities, you unlock what's possible. Until next time.